Okay, you're up.
No pressure, Paul. No pressure.
Unmuted. Good.
Just waiting for Blake. He's just walking in, so. Can't start without the man.
Yeah, well, that's very.
Hey, good afternoon, 2 minutes afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for the August 8th special meeting of the Ottawa County Planning and Policy Committee special work session. Primarily, this meeting is going to be talking about our 2024 to 2029 capital improvement plan. But before that, we have an opportunity for public comment. 3 minutes. Please address public comment to the chair. We have no takers, it looks like. Okay. All right. I'll just make a second call. Okay. All right. Second item on the agenda would be the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
Make that motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay. Motion and seconded. All in favor for the approval of today's agenda, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, next item, we have no consent resolutions, so let's kick off the conversation of the 2024-2029 Ottawa County Capital Improvement Plan. Is there a suggested motion from any of our members? Approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the 2024 to 2029 Capital Improvement Plan?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Karen.
Hello again. So I was just going to do a brief overview of the actual document. I know we've seen the presentation, or we've gone over the presentation. It's at the back of the agenda item that's attached to the work session. So our capital improvement plan starts with, just a project name. So we break out our capital projects in terms of facilities, crime prevention through environmental design, IT, Department of Strategic Impact projects, and parks. So we categorize our projects in subgroups, and then we have a project description, and we've added that this year. It's for all of the projects that are currently funded and projects for fiscal year 24. So the out years, we will add that going forward, but this year we just added it for the ones that are funded or requesting funding for next year. And then you have a funding source. So that is the accounting behind the request. So where the project will be funded from, it's common to see OCIA, which is the insurance authority, or maybe 401, which is the capital projects fund, or you might see parks, which is the parks millage. So you'll see a number of things under the funding source. And then what you see is currently approved. These are projects approved in prior years that still have balances. The budget resolution, when it's adopted, adopts projects for the life of the project. And it's very common for these projects to take longer than 1 year. So we may start, but we don't complete. The projects roll till they're done or till they're closed. And then so actuals, so these are for projects that have current funding, the actuals as of June 21st, and then any encumbrances or open contract amounts that we're still committed to. And then you have an unencumbered balance. So sometimes you can look at that unencumbered balance and see, between sometimes we are very close to being done at this time of the year. We're getting to the end of the year, we would go through a closeout process. So there's potentially things that will get closed this year before we complete the county's year. And then you have each year of our plan basically under those categories. So 2024 through 2029. And I guess the only other thing I'd add is that under facilities as a committee, we did, you can see we break out facilities by, capital maintenance on building exterior, the hardscapes, roofs. So we've got additional categories there. There's 3 categories that we've talked about as a group, but we're still trying to fully come up with a plan on. And those are the building interior maintenance, plumbing, and ADA. So because there were no projects, we've hid those category headings, but as things evolve into future years, I would expect to see those added back into the plan. So that is basically an overview of the projects, and they're listed here. 2024 includes and then I guess at the very bottom or the last page of the document, you would see the funding sources. So how we're proposing the current projects to be funded. This is an important component. Rating agencies look at this. If you have a plan for your capital projects, how do you plan on paying for those? What is the funding source that you're using to pay for projects? So that's outlined at the bottom. And so that is, and then when it says 401, the capital projects fund, that is most generally funded by a transfer from the general fund. So just it doesn't have a funding source all by itself. So it's a place to capture and account for projects. And so we may use grants or other things, but most frequently its funding source is the general fund with a transfer. Were there any questions about the actual document or any questions about projects that you wanted to go into or?
Commissioner Bonema, I'll just kick us off.
You bet. Thank you. The team that's helping guide this consists of 4 department directors and the deputy administrator. With his absence, do we have somebody filling in his position?
Not at this point.
So it's just the 4 department directors that are the team guiding it. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Zylstra?
Sure. Are we kind of starting in on individual items yet, or are we still kind of?
I guess we kind of have at it. If I know we have a lot of our planning team here as well as other department heads. So, yeah.
Okay, sure. When we talked, I think 2 weeks ago about the jail. I wonder if we can kind of just run through that jail generator. I think it's set for 2029. And is that, something maybe we could push forward a little bit? It does seem a bit of a risk profile item. And maybe insurance authority could be involved in that as well.
Part of the generational power supply to the buildings is something that Al and John Shea had started. We talked about using ARPA, but we didn't get to that point to put those projects in. We really need to do a load study. The generator over there is original. It's a diesel generator, so it's getting quite old. But it's also not, a generator should be loaded to 80%. That was never loaded to 80%. So
yeah. What exactly does that mean, loaded to 80%?
So
sorry.
80% of capacity.
Okay.
If it's
run at 80% of capacity.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So we're running that one at about 60% capacity, 65% capacity. Seems simple. We'll just add more things to it, run it harder. It's actually good for them.
Sure.
The problem is the switch gear that is so hard to come by these days. We can't get to add more load to it. So it's really going to take an electrical engineering group to come in and do a study on the jail, what we need to do there, this building, what we need to do here, and kind of put together a line by line. Lou Hunt and EOC had also put out, we've met with them several times on trying to come up with a dual redundancy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a diesel generator. This one's natural gas. Do we come up with an outlet and try to get a big diesel generator that we can move if propane goes down?
Sure.
Trying to accomplish everything. So I think on On the generator thing, I think what we really need to do, why we kicked that one out there, was to put it in as a placeholder
Sure.
to try to get the engineering done
Okay.
in between now and then.
And then the building, the film building itself, that is original equipment as well, or has that been updated?
The generator to here,
Yeah.
it's original.
Okay.
It's not. We maintain them, we have service contracts on them, so we keep them up really well. It just isn't big enough
Sure.
to do everything we need it to
Okay.
do.
Okay. Good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Moss?
A quick question. Blake, what are the cooling towers? James Street, what are those?
Cooling towers,
Yeah.
it's air conditioning. Some some buildings have more of like a conventional cooling condensing coil, much like your house, only larger.
Mhm.
Cooling towers are basically so the piping goes through the ceiling, water goes out, it's got a glycol mix to it, so it's cooling, but it goes out through a tower and it's air cooled next to the building, then it comes back in. They last about 20-25 years. A and C or A and B are both at end of life, and we can't get parts for them anymore. So prior to that failure point, try to get them swapped out.
Cool. Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Rhodey?
Blake, could you also just review for us? I know we had talked last time about ADA and bringing bringing some of those needed changes
Yep.
into action. Can you just explain some of the things that you are working on and how that could work into the CIP plan?
Yeah, we actually yesterday we took a really in-depth look, John Vargo and myself. He is my compliance coordinator. So we went and took what we deemed the oldest structure and most front facing that has the highest need for the public. That led us to the James Street campus, which is buildings A, B, and C. A and B are mental health, and half of B is the Juvenile Justice Center, and then C building is public health. So we went through those and we looked at them to kind of look at, obviously age is a big part of why they're so out of date, and they're not completely out of date, but they definitely need some work. We met with Karen to talk to her about there is a CIP that was a clinic remodel CIP that was tabled because it was to do the work that needed to be done. It exceeded the CIP. Funding wasn't there to do that, so we tabled it. We can, to get a jump start on this, on the ADA, instead of moving it out to 25, while we're working on a countywide plan, what we're proposing is we open that project back up. As Karen said, the funding rolls, so it's sitting there. We relabel it. We scale that project way back, and we hit all the public facing ADA needs so that C building is a fully compliant building by the end of this fiscal year. With that, there's also, I believe we tried to achieve a $5 million CIP. I think our projects ended up somewhere around 4.6 to 7 million. So it leaves us about 300,000 in the CIP. With that, that's where we went and looked at the other two buildings to see what can we do? How can we start addressing those needs yet this year? Now, part of this is a give and take of trying to balance the project load we have, the project load we're trying to finish from before I got here, and adding those things in. And I think we can manage that load. So we would go through and we'd update the things like making the restrooms. It's not that the restroom isn't accessible, it's that the partitions are too small. I was in one yesterday and scratched my head, and I walked in on 2 feet and couldn't hardly get in the stall. So there's a lot of things like that need to be cleaned up and made more accessible so that people, part of the accessibility is signage. We can have everything accessible, but if it's not labeled so that folks can find it, then how do they use it? So those would be the two areas that we really focus on those 3 buildings. And Hudsonville Public, I guess not the public backside of the building. We have a CIP that we're working on right now to make those 2 bathrooms ADA compliant.
Okay.
So there'd be 4 buildings that we touch as far as trying to get pretty compliant in 24.
Okay. That sounds great. And do we need to do anything with this plan before we would approve it to make adjustments then?
So yes, I think we would need to, not necessarily for the clinic, we could recategorize that into
Okay.
the ADA category. So we would update this document with those projects under the ADA title heading and adding those. So the fiscal year 24 budget would also get adjusted for the projects fund, but we would make those edits before it went to the full board for approval,
Okay.
if that's the direction of this committee.
So just to confirm, when we, assuming that we pass this list of projects, there's sort of like these changes that you're making when we present this to the full Board of Commissioners, these edits will have been made so that it reflects that request.
Right,
Okay.
yes, the desire of this committee would be shown on that document.
Okay.
I guess I would move to amend this document then to reflect these changes regarding the ADA projects and then have them reflected in the next document.
Yep, I'll support the motion.
All right. So we have a motion and a support. This one, I think would, being that it's financial in nature, we would want to have a roll call on this one. For this,
Just,
sure. Yeah.
you want to go first, Allison?
Go ahead. I just was asking if we want to have discussion before we go to a vote, and if you have something.
Yeah, no, just, are we talking about putting a placeholder number here or putting a line item?
I believe it's changing the description and then putting it under the heading of ADA. Is that, I believe that's what the,
So it would be on page 3 of the document. There's a building C clinic remodel. That one would be changing heading and changing where it's just making a change on the current document. There is no there's no financial impact because that particular project is already funded. So it's just focusing in on a certain portion of the project before the rest of the project. There will likely be a phase 2 to this at some point in that remodel. The second one, I think what I heard Blake say was that he has 2 other buildings with some work. We would add those and we would enter project amounts up to $350,000 on those project lines. That would be in 24. That would be in the 24 column. So that would change this document, change what was approved by the board, make a change to the fiscal year 24 proposed budget for that $350,000.
And so our total would remain the same then, correct?
Oh,
The entirety of the CIP budget would still remain the same.
You would be appropriating up to the 5 million in fiscal year 24. At this point, we were not quite there. We were at 4.6
Okay,
something and some change. So it would be taking it to that full 5 million.
okay.
So that means that under the category facilities, there's going to be a separate subgroup called ADA, and then the projects that we're speaking of right now will be broken out into that subgroup. And the dollars will be subtracted from that total for James Street, for instance, or.
Correct. The James
Correct,
Street
yeah.
remodel will disappear.
Perfect. Thank you.
Chair,
yes.
sounds great to me. That's it.
Okay.
And thank you, Karen and Blake and everybody for investing the time and putting in the, time to figure out the details.
Before we take a vote on this amendment, is there any other questions? We have other staff members here. I know I have just a couple myself.
I do.
Okay,
On this amendment?
But we should,
Just the
On
amendment.
this
vote on the
amendment.
amendment
Talk about
first.
the amendment.
yeah, we need
Okay.
to vote on the
Vote.
amendment
We need
first.
to vote it.
Okay. Any other discussion on the amendment? Just to be clear what it is, it's adding a descriptor under the facilities called ADA, which is Americans with Disabilities Act. And these are the, I guess, projects that are going to be intended upon, meeting that objective of improving that our facilities and our environment for that.
Yeah, there's actually, kind of the way I envision this going is the federal government sets a bare minimum standard. What we need to establish, we can meet that standard. The question I would pose to this group or the full board is, what is your desire and expectation for an Ottawa County standard? There's nothing that prohibits us from exceeding the threshold. So I'd like to meet and put together a group and establish that standard.
Commissioner Cosme?
When you're asking standard, are you speaking about specifically for ADA standard? Or are you talking about a standard as it relates to facilities?
Just kind of like it would just be, for this portion, it would just be the ADA portion of how our buildings are accessible. But then that becomes a basis of design and a threshold. I mean, we include the minimum that we have to have, but are there certain areas that we want to
Prioritize?
prioritize, but make more accessible? Like if a door only requires 3 to 5 pounds of force to push it in, it's still hard to do in a wheelchair. Do we want to just make our standard a power opener?
So you're saying this would be something different than the standard that's in place through ADA?
Yeah, we would
policy?
meet both
So
our
you-
options.
would you like to have your own standard?
Yeah, we can set that kind of baseline threshold that
Mhm.
is set by ADA. But as Ottawa County, do we want to raise that standard to some degree as our basis?
Has
for our
that been your
buildings?
experience before, Blake?
Based on certain factors, I wouldn't say across the board you want to raise it, but there are certain areas that would make accessibility much more convenient.
Absolutely. So lean on our experts.
Mhm.
Is it kind of safe to say that in this situation with this amendment, moving these 3 projects, it's kind of like a triage situation to get these key buildings in good shape? And then as we progress into future years, the CIP, we then reflect upon these goals
Mhm.
and adding those standards.
Yeah.
Okay.
Highest volume, those most impacted.
Yeah. Yeah, create that
The
priority
buildings,
list.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Commissioner Minima?
So for example, maybe having doors that are kind of like, instead of the button that you have to push, the one's more like in a grocery store where it's an automatic
Mhm.
open as you come up to it. Is that one example?
That would be an example.
Commissioner Rhodey?
I appreciate you bringing that up, and I'm speaking for myself here, but I think it would be great to think about, what's a good, helpful experience for the person, not
Mhm.
just, how can we save the most money? So, I think for a lot of that, we're gonna lean into your expertise on it.
Okay.
But I'd like your proposal about, getting a group together and talking about it some more
Mhm.
as we move forward. But I think, we want to take care of our people, not just check boxes.
Yeah.
So,
But I think it's what it does is if we're able to establish this quote unquote standard that Ottawa County wants to set for our buildings and such, it's a template that just gets repeated.
mhm.
It's consistent. If somebody goes to Holland District Court, they can expect the exact same experience at Hudsonville District Court. If they go to the Family Justice Center, they can expect the exact same experience in Grand Haven. It's that consistency also helps with
Management.
managing their accessibility and needs. So,
Okay.
Commissioner Minima?
I would agree with what Commissioner Rhodey had mentioned. I would love for you to present to us as we go.
Mhm.
Some options that would help us make those decisions, because I think that is what we would like to see.
Okay.
A uniform approach, at least I can speak for myself across the county, that they can know that they're gonna go to this building, as you said, and they know what to expect, and that it would be well done, right?
Yeah.
So,
If they're used to going to Holland District Court for something and the signage is in locations consistently,
Mhm.
and they have to come to the Fillmore building for something, they can expect to find the same information in the same locations in the same manner.
Commissioner Moss?
Yeah, I think this is one of the benefits of this CIP, process and having it as proactive and consistent. Year after year, we can kind of build these things in as we go and make sure that, those kind of standards are followed. It's great.
Commissioner Zelstra?
Yeah, just to kind of clarify, so on the facilities page, instead of the 5, there'd be a 6th category entitled ADA. What would that be entitled?
We would probably label it in the CIP. The way we have that is they're designated as systems.
Okay,
So it'd be probably an ADA or compliance system
Okay.
so that we can
And
add more
then-
to it.
and then which 3 projects would be pulled into that? Sorry.
Yeah, so it sounds like the project, the first one is Building C. So this is page 3. The 4th project underneath the current remodeling of wall covering, floor coverings, and FFE. So Building C would then be moved under this new category.
Mhm.
I understand the dollar amount would stay the same, but we're gonna adjust the description,
Yeah, the scope.
scope.
It
Okay.
would all be not geared towards office furniture and things like that. It would be geared towards gaining accessibility.
Okay. All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
Anyone else? So we'll take a vote on this amendment and we'll continue the conversation because there's lots of items and I know we have lots of expertise in the room that we'll want to tap into. So
I apologize. Was there a motion? Did somebody motion this? I
yes,
missed it.
we're gonna motion to amend this list.
Did somebody in particular though, like,
Commissioner Rhodey.
okay.
Yep. Rhodey and seconded by Commissioner Moss or Miedema.
I think it was me. Okay.
Perfect. Okay, Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mrs. Miedema,
yes.
Mrs. Ebel. Yes. Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay. Thank you. It is a little bit of a free for all here, and I apologize for that for our department heads that are here. I don't know, does anyone want to take any specific questions for, so we have Sheriff Kempker here and we have Paul here. Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Moss.
2 quick ones. Just wondering in general how the card access update is going.
It's going amazing.
Excellent.
Phase 1 is, I think we're 6 readers away. The secured elevators have readers in them. Our contractor can't put those in. Only a licensed elevator technician can put those in. So that is, some of those have been changed yet this week. They should be finished this week. That will wrap up phase 1. All cards have been distributed. We're going through and working on, we'll be working in collaborating with HR and the rest of the SEPTED team to build a policy for the card access rule, and how we want to, set that. Phase 2 will be rolling right in as soon as I get the elevators done. We'll be starting at this building, pulling in all the extra readers. So I think we're still looking to have significant completion by October 1.
Great. Thanks.
Mhm.
Next, my second question is for Paul. There was a server upgrade schedule. Just wondered if there was more detail. Sorry, Paul Klimas. Sorry, Paul.
I don't know how to get myself on camera, but the county has 2 data centers, one in Grand Haven, one here. It's our intent, because it's reaching end of life every 5 years, we go through, we refresh. And this refresh is going to consolidate both of those data centers into one here. Our strategy for all of this is to go multi-cloud. So you're seeing more and more of our business units, our departments using software as a service. So as we do that, and as we engage cloud storage and cloud computing capabilities, our server farm need on premise shrinks, right? So this is like the first step towards that. And as we keep pushing or leaning on our operations to get into software as a service type architectures, the next time we refresh 5 years from then, we should see a smaller less cost footprint.
Cool. Thank you.
Mr. Bonema, did you have a question?
I do. Are we ready to move on to the sheriff?
Sure.
All right. When Commissioner Miedema and I took a tour of the jail with the undersheriff, we were walked around and given a pretty substantial tour. And we were made aware of the growing need of our population that suffers from some sort of mental illness, and how we have a greater need for capacity to segment some of those that suffer from a mental illness away from the general population for the health and well-being of both sides. I know that some discussion took place about remodeling one of the existing jail pods to accommodate that. I believe we've got some progress towards what that might look like. I understand that the numbers are coming in substantially higher than expected. However, I'm looking at this plan all the way out to 2029, and I'm not seeing anything in here to help out with that. So my question really is if you could give us an update on what you've experienced so far, and also if you feel that there's some other way that we're going to handle this population that's still safe for everybody if it's not here by remodeling a pod.
Right. We're still, we hired a architect firm that has come in. Matter of fact, we have the initial drawings back from them recently to take a look at to see if we can maybe cut cost a little bit. We found out that jail construction is extremely expensive because it is all brick and mortar, special doors, special things that have to be done within the jail facility to fall in compliance with Michigan Department of Corrections. And also want to make sure that we do it right the first time. So again, we're working with the company right now to narrow down some estimated figures on that. So as we do, we'll work closely with Karen and Fiscal to look at that and give her that information. Definitely a capital improvement plan, not something that we'd pull the checkbook out and tell them to go to work tomorrow and write the check. Like I said, it came in substantially more expensive, and we've seen that talking to other sheriffs with their jails when they do these pod and renovations to make sure it's done right for the safety and security. But also, yes, that need is still there, and we're working through that right now. We've made several adjustments within the jail facility. But again, I think the pod working in collaboration with CMH and our staff, pulling medical and everybody together substantially in the future is going to be a huge benefit.
So is that something that you'd want to accomplish before 2029?
I would like to. Of course, I can give you a whole list of things I'd like to accomplish before 2029, but I think, as you know, that the mental health pod is one on the top of our priority. And I think after we work with the consultants and the designers, if we go back and make any changes to see what that does to the cost, and then work with Karen and her group.
So would that then be added in this budget cycle? Are you expecting to hear back in that amount of time, or is this something that might be added next year, or where does the money come from? I guess.
Yeah, I guess I would have to estimate probably into next year.
Because we're talking about maybe a $2 to $4 or $5 million
exactly
expenditure. So that doesn't just show up. So I'm just wondering if we need to set some dry powder aside for something like this.
Yeah,
If
and
it's
that's
a critical need.
Yeah, once we, again, I want to get the figures narrowed down more closely with the consultants, the engineer and the design group that we had the money to bring in to do the initial assessment. Get those figures into Karen and probably look at plugging in some more solid figures for the next budget year.
Are you able to handle that population safely between now and I mean, you got a substantial amount of time. If it's next
Right.
year, then there's still the construction period. It's
Right.
2 years from now. It's
Yeah. I think we can, we've managed along the last several years. But again, we have seen an uptick in the mental health incidents within the jail. But again, our staff does amazing work there of working with them. CMH does an amazing job. It does sometimes require us to make some movements of people within the jail for safety and security reasons or because of their mental health status. So again, yeah, would I love to have it tomorrow morning? Most definitely. But I know it's a process and we want to make sure that we do it right. And get our numbers as close within a reasonable figure, to put it that way.
so we should expect to talk more about this next year.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is not a dead issue on our side of the house. Again, the consultant firm that we hired has been absolutely wonderful to work with. And just within the last week, we received a blueprint from them. If you'd like to take a look at it, or any of you would, please let me know. But again, yeah, we definitely want to keep this one on track.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Zelstra?
Thank you very much. And I'm not sure who, maybe Karen on this one. The insurance authority, I think we were around 23 million at the end of last fiscal year. Do we have a balance on that right now? That probably around 30 or something like that, right?
Sorry,
The insurance authority,
had what?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the amount.
Sorry, I'm just reading the balance at the end of last fiscal year is 23 million. I assume that it's more
Where-
than that right now, right? With
Where-
the insurance
Where are
authority.
you seeing it?
I'm sorry,
Where do you see the,
the insurance authority?
yes.
I mean, it's not in here, sorry.
Oh, okay.
No, that the balance of the insurance authority is not in here, obviously.
Okay. So,
Sorry
yes.
about that. I'm trying to, try to stick to one document at a time, but just trying to see like what the balance is now. Do we have like a max transfer policy? Like, if we need to bring out X amount of money out of the insurance authority to do some of these things, is there like,
Sure, yes, there's a maximum. I mean, we haven't established a policy on it, but I think we've talked with the group about the work group and the insurance authority board about the financial position of the insurance authority and maintaining a strong financial position to make sure that we can provide that insurance for unplanned events.
right,
And so while the risk mitigation grants that the insurance authority has made is a great opportunity, I think we've tried to balance that. There has been, so in 2022, the market,
Right.
suffered. And so the insurance authority also took a reduction there. We reviewed it, I believe. So the money in the insurance authority is probably, I'm going a little bit from memory, but about 35 or 36 million.
okay, that would make sense.
A portion of that is county contributed capital.
Right.
And then a portion of that is funding for the workers' comp fund.
Okay,
So the actual available balance is around, I think, like 27 million. And then we have on the statements of the insurance authority, there's a $17 million like liability for basically the potential for unplanned or unknown things that are going to occur. So it's really just looking at that relationship and making sure that we maintain that financial position.
okay,
So they will be looking at their budget in a couple weeks
okay,
to
okay.
see about with the grants that they can manage as part of the
Right.
24 budget.
okay, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think we're all, like, for example, on the body cams, I think we're all big supporters of that. And, if we need to go over 1 million, then that's not going to be an issue.
So the insurance authority has made that commitment and they like the county to balance that or to keep things in balance. The insurance authority makes those commitments for the life of the project as well. So therefore, the county knows that it can count on that as a commitment.
Okay.
So that $1 million that has been $1,045,000 that's been set aside is something the insurance authority also sets aside and,
Okay,
and makes
But
that
if-
commitment.
but if that runs over that, then that's not gonna present an issue with the insurance authority.
I guess we'd have to talk to the insurance authority board about any changes that would be necessary.
Okay,
If that were to occur.
okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Bonneman.
I have more. I don't like to ask all my questions at once because I want to let everybody else ask their questions, but so I took, this is probably for Blake. I took a tour of the ODC recently, and as we're touring around the Outdoor Discovery Center, they were pointing out buildings, part of their park system that just had aged out, were costing more to maintain than keep around. They were redundant. They'd been replaced with other facilities. I know I was talking to Commissioner Bergman during the break. He said like maybe 10 years ago in 2013, we did something like that here in Ottawa County. But with our park system, do we have, or anywhere else for that matter, buildings that just cost more to maintain than, outlive their usable life that we should be shuttering,
From a facilities perspective, we're pretty good on, we haven't reached end of life on needing to tear out completely. As far as the parks are concerned, I'm not aware of what Jason has. He may.
Well, and that's why I was here. So, for parks in particular, we go through our rec planning. So we look at the beginning of our levy cycle, we did a 10-year plan that then was mapped out all of our capital expenditures for the first 5 years. And then in 2021, we updated that. So the vast majority of our capital projects are directly from that rec plan. We've had a few that we've added since then, but in particular, the reconstruction today that the committee reviewed for Kirk Park is a major renovation of that building. So
the restrooms.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's pretty much the support beams will be the only thing left. So we decided that was more cost effective than doing a whole new building, but so today's contract was for the renovations of the building. Then I think, a couple weeks ago, we did the contract for the sewer, the septic system. So we have actually all of that fairly well mapped out. And then we also project certain percentages just for like, you'll note there might be boardwalks or other things that we have listed in there. We don't necessarily do those until they're necessary. So we might do some renovations or repairs, but then wait for the major reconstructions until it's necessary. So.
Okay. So we're just addressing them as they come.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And then as we, we'll be talking at some point soon, we're kind of going through the planning stages of a strategic plan, but it'll be to evaluate our resources, the assets that we have, looking to the future as this levy cycle runs through 2026. So then as we look 26 and beyond, what's that look like for us?
Great. And then I guess I have a follow-up for Karen.
Yep.
What are some of the notable budget cuts that you might want to share with us as you're looking at that you're noticing? Do you have any cuts anywhere in the budget that you could talk us through?
Budget cuts in the county's operating budget?
Yeah, department spending. Well, we're on CIP right now, but if we're asking about a little bit of everything, yeah, do you see some reductions in spending anywhere across any of the departments that are notable?
I mean, we obviously with the closure of the DEI office, that is a reduction. That's not any particular department making a change. I think that there's pressures to maintain the items that we have and maintain the consistent level of service that we provide. So I can't think of anything across the board or in a particular department as people finish projects or finish initiatives. Things kind of ebb and flow a little bit, but I can't honestly think of anything in particular that is a pretty major reduction in a department. It doesn't mean there aren't any.
Other than, well, for spending, let's go to the flip side of the question, right? Other than facilities where we're looking at capital improvement projects where there's a significant increase in spending. Do you see any other notable changes in the budget going forward where we're spending more than we have historically that you'd like to point out or talk about?
So there is, there's the support for the Family Justice Center as a new building. In addition to that, there's, as we do new initiatives, for example, the body cameras, I think it's already been stated, but there's 9 new positions in the budget to help support the administrative effort that it would require for that project. There's a increase. We're seeing it's not hugely significant, but $250,000 maybe in utilities, just as we're seeing that cost rise. So the big initiatives, and then just planning for personnel costs and changes there that are, contractual, like steps and normal changes in the payroll process.
You mentioned earlier that approximately 48% of our budget is payroll, serving the employees of the county, so they can serve us, right? Are you expecting that to increase very much here with these new hires? Is it going to go from 48% to above 50%?
So it's pretty amazing how consistent those percentages stay over time. I'm not saying they don't ever move up 1%, but with a budget the size, the based on the amount that we can afford to add in any year, there's not huge fluctuations in those percentages generally.
So that 48's been pretty consistent over the last couple decades, in your opinion?
I don't know about decades, but certainly the last 5 years.
Okay.
Or so. I think, organization would change over decades.
Commissioner Cosby?
Yeah, and I was just reviewing what County Administrator Gibbs shared with us as we prepare for the budget year 2024. And it looks like we're going to be looking at accounts payable, all people, receiving funds, new personnel, departments and programs. So I think there's a lot more to come. We're kind of just in the beginning phases, correct?
Sure.
Before we know if we could maybe perhaps bring it back to CIP, they'll be prepared for it. So. Court of the Family Justice Center was something you're saying you're predicting to into the future, correct? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. In the county operating budget, yes.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions if there's, okay. I'm going to pick on Paul and your team and GIS. There's a line item that repeats every year for the county's participation in the oblique and orthophoto imagery and LiDAR. What does all of that mean?
Oh, yes.
Great question. Great question.
So I'm Shane Pavlik. I'm the GIS supervisor. I manage a team of GIS people here that do all the internal and external mapping applications. We also help with the contract and managing the project for the aerial imagery. So if you're not familiar with what aerial imagery is, it is flown by a plane, it's not satellite imagery, which is great in its own for its own uses, but it's not as detailed and it is not as accurate as what a plane-based imagery is. We get 3-inch pixel resolution, which the satellite imagery at best is like 16 feet by 16 feet, like 5 meters accuracy. And then this imagery is used as our basis for all property and land analysis at the county level. but it's also used for central dispatch and emergency services. The sheriff's department uses it inside their vehicles. Yeah, it's used by like all the engineering firms working on behalf of our departments. So we provide that imagery to them as an authoritative source. We have control over typically when it is flown. So it's usually spring because that's when we want leaf off. Satellite imagery does not provide that same sort of ability to control when it's flown. We also don't have to worry about clouds with a plane-based imagery. Satellite imagery, you'll notice sometimes that there's some cloud cover or some shadows from clouds, and that kind of stuff is not in our imagery.
And so it's not just the imagery itself, but this process that you participate in, it gives you elevation models too, I understand. Is that correct? So like our GIS system it's getting the imagery, but it's also getting topography.
So we do get LiDAR from a different source. We actually got LiDAR as part of a national program. So they, along with the state of Michigan, we actually received LiDAR from them at no cost to us, besides to have it built into contours.
So as the plane flies, there's a laser that sweeps across the land, and it's getting you an elevation and a location for everything. So we take that and we create what's called a TIN, or a network that you can actually lay out. And if it were mountainous, you'd see it real obviously, but in other cases, and that way, when you're using an ortho photo, you can measure from point to point and get an accurate measure without necessarily having to do survey. Right? There's also obliques.
Yes, we have the oblique imagery.
This is something that you might see in like Google Maps, right? Where you're looking at an angle of a property, right? So, and if warranted, we could get a lot of other different types of aerial photography, like false color infrared for impervious area definitions, all used for engineering purposes and water runoff and saturations and soils management. So it's one of these key components of just a data fabric that we constantly maintain for just an array of uses. In case that happened, because we're saying LiDAR and everybody's like, what is LiDAR?
And the oblique imagery is really that extra product that we get that shows that 45-degree angle into around any building, which is fantastic for use for like from the EOC emergency management side of things. We also, at one time, we also got a product, you can use it for change detection. So you can actually see different changes to buildings and all that kind of stuff. Is another product that they offer.
Okay, maybe this is more of a question for Paul, because we have allocated funds for every year of this 5-year window. This is payment into a participation project. This isn't just a county initiative. This is we're joining in with some of our local units as well. Is that correct?
Well, the data fabric that we're creating is used by just a lot. Right, not just other townships and things, other cities, but even the public. Right, so when you go out and you look at our GIS, you see this data fabric sitting out there, and it's used by railway. It's used by major construction, right, to do basic estimations and things. I would suspect it's probably used by agriculture to some degree, because now agriculture has now gone very tech. At least large agriculture has gone tech. So putting a pin on who's actually using it all the time can be hard.
Sure.
But I tell you from experience, have it not be available or have it fail. We get calls like immediately.
Oh.
You don't really know who's actually leveraging it at the time until it's not working right.
Yeah, and we've actually built up a catalog all the way back to like the year 2000 of imagery, and actually even further back if you take into account some of the older imagery that we have from like the 1940s and 1950s. And we have that all on for the public to use, to just be able to see the different changes between the years and all that, and for research purposes.
So before you build a deck, get a permit,
Sure.
change detection.
Yes.
Well, it just a comment of how, technology's migrated. This system has kind of replaced the old, plat books that you would go to the, your township and you see the Sidwell parcel maps and that type of thing. So I appreciate your time, Shane and Paul, on that. I just had to ask some questions on that. So anyone else have any questions? All right, I was gonna pick on Paul a little bit on a update on some of the trails that are listed under the strategic impact line item in the capital plan.
Absolutely. Always. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, we have the Spoonville Trail Phase 2. Just a broad update, I guess, on what this is and what because we're allocating pretty good chunk over a couple phases just for the benefit of everybody.
Yes, pleased to report that trail project has been completed. It has also won numerous awards, which is fantastic. Parks Department has been a great partner and they are now managing that trail, which is perfect. There are still some closeout items on it because there was TAP funding that went through it, that went through MDOT, and with the road commission acting as a agency partner with us, they're still tallying up some invoices. So there's still some outstanding bills yet to be paid, which is why it's still sitting here.
The CHAP funding is, it
Yes.
takes time to close out.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
With that, I would believe we are probably ready. We have a motion and a support. We have an amendment. Is there any other
I
questions?
said no, but I do have
Okay.
one more question.
All
For
right.
Karen, yeah. Thanks for being flexible, Karen. I feel like you've somewhat addressed this already, but I just want to go back to your presentation. For me, it's page 9 of 18. It's the history of funding of county projects, and it's a bar graph. And in that graph, it shows years 2016, 17, and 18 with very little, if any, county project funding. And then everything changes after that, right? Could you just walk me through that one more time? If you've addressed it, I apologize. I know that we somewhat neglected our county projects, and so now we're playing some catch up. I've heard that. But did we really go 3 years with almost no maintenance and repair and addressing things like we needed to?
So I think it's really a combination of the slide that you're on and the slide before it. So the slide with that shows 16, 17, and 18 with very little funding. I think it was really a long-term practice when we had excess fund balance over policy in the general fund. The board would take action and contribute it to projects. And it was captured and held until projects came. So the fact that we weren't contributing doesn't necessarily mean we weren't doing any projects.
Okay.
It means that there was no standard general fund contribution that the team could count on to know, because sometimes you don't always know how the general fund ends or where that one-time funding is coming from. And so that's the funding. If you flip to the page before, those same years, there were projects now where they funded with, money that had built up, grants, I need to dig into more detail to know how they're funded, but it's the combination of the two slides together, I think, help you understand better.
Was that, and I can see there's 2.2 million, being spent. So there's still some millions being spent in there
Mhm.
in 15 and 16.
Sure.
Was there a reason that they switched away from that model? Prior to that, it looks like in 2015, they were putting it out of or they were taking money out of the general fund. And then they did what you just described, that model. And now they seem to, have gone back since 2019 and forward.
So I think that I think it was more, I think that the change occurred really starting to get that consistent funding in 2000. We started really in 2017, I think. So after that, so I don't think that there was a going away from the one-time money. It still needs to decide how that funding over excess over policy would be spent. I don't know that was we went away from. It just isn't consistent enough to fund this.
And that's the goal that we're talking about here, is to do something more consistent. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that probably when you see it in, if you read old budget transmittal letters, there's probably reference to that as some of the challenges that we're facing, and kind of moving from that new building, less maintenance model to maintaining existing facilities and what we have. So I think some of that is a transition period that we've been going through, and just trying to get that funding consistent. So it's the general fund contribution that started like in 17 really comes from growth in the tax base.
Mhm.
And it comes from making that available resources to start making those commitments. And then it's easier to do on an ongoing basis.
Would the growth of the county match the growth of the spending? So if the county grew by 6%, is the spending growing by 6%, or is it growing by 20%?
I don't think there's necessarily a correlation. I think it's based on need, and it's based on how well the facilities, have been maintained, how they were constructed. I mean, there's a lot of factors that play into that. So it's not directly related to population growth. I mean, there's probably a component of additional need that is related to population growth, but I don't know that there's a 1-for-1 there.
Mhm. Okay, thanks.
Let's take a vote. One last chance for questions, but I think we're probably ready to take a roll call vote on this.
Sounds good. Ms. Cosby,
Yes.
Mr. Zylstra,
Yes.
Mr. Bonema,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Just wanted to extend a gratitude for everybody here, our commissioners and our team that put together this capital improvement plan, and Karen and Paul and Blake and everyone on the team and those supporting. Just thank you for your time today, and just a little bit of this clumsiness of us, kind of throwing questions at you from every direction. So appreciate your time and effort. Okay. So with that, I don't believe we have anything for a committee report, so we can move into a second round of public comment. Anyone like to address the room?
My name's Dave Barnowski. I vote in Port Sheldon Township, and I'm going to tell what I hope is an amusing anecdote and make a point. Mostly because I think it's going to hurt Joe Moss's reputation more than it will hurt mine. But Joe Moss and I sat in a hallway outside of the plat board meeting and had a civil conversation for 5 minutes. And we spoke about the superior engineering of the Honda Ridgeline. I wanted to bring up the point because I want to I want to impress it upon you, and I want to give him some leeway. Because I want to bring up some other superior engineering that I know is coming to the fore. And if he's doing some replacements on air conditioning, there is a wave of new engineering coming out. They've made a lot of improvements in what is it? Where you turn air conditioning, it goes both ways. Heat pumps. Heat pumps are making a lot of strides and are able to make better use of, or they're better in cold weather. They are more expensive in the initial purchase, but they will save energy and they will save money. So if he's going to be making some replacements, and if he's willing, if Blake is willing to do the investigation, I would like to prime you to spend a little bit more if he's able to do, and in particular, if you can get ground loop heat pumps, those are amazing. But if you can't, you can still do air source heat pumps, and they are an advantage to the county if you can get those instead of just replacing air conditioning units as yes. And basically, if for those who don't understand the engineering, it allows you to turn them around in the winter and make them into heaters and then turn them back around and become air conditioning. That's all. I can be positive.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going twice. 3 times. We are adjourned. Thank you for your time every day, everybody, for today.